Atheist YouTuber CosmicSkeptic seems to be sounding more and more Christian these days. He recently posted a video talking about Christianity's biggest problem, and by the end of the video it sounded more like atheism's biggest problem. But before I get to that conclusion, let's hear what the supposed biggest problem is.
Why would an all-powerful God, who truly loves us, permit such suffering to overwhelm our living existence? And this problem for religion is called, as you'll likely know, the problem of evil. But there's something missing from this picture. I'm not just here to restate the problem of evil as if it's anything new. There's something else. There exists such an obvious and overwhelming version of the problem of evil that it bemuses me that so many philosophers leave it entirely out of the discussion, or at best relegate it to a passing paragraph or a footnote or something. I'm talking, of course, about the problem of animal suffering. Now, before you think I'm just getting all vegan on you again, don't worry, that's not what this is.
You are totally getting all vegan on us again. I'm Nathan Collins, bringing you the truth of Christ in a post-truth culture. CosmicSkeptic's whole point for this video is based on the age-old problem of evil, but oddly enough, he suggests in this video that adding animal suffering into the mix somehow changes the game and makes the argument even stronger. It doesn't. For those of you who don't know what the problem of evil argument is, it goes a little something like this. If there is an all-powerful and all-loving God, why is there human suffering, or in this case, animal suffering? The answer seems tough if you are new to the argument, but it's actually quite a bunk argument and has been dead and buried a long time ago in the academic world. Which obviously CosmicSkeptic must know. He's a very sharp guy and usually serves up some fun challenges, but this one was weirdly weak. So what's up with the weirdly weak video? Well, my theory for this is, I think he's going kind of soft on us. I think his passion and emotion for animals and veganism are starting to get to him. It's kind of like when you know when someone is in love and they defend the things their loved one says even though everyone knows it's way off. And even your friend would normally too, but they are so in love they agree with all kinds of silly things even though normally they would never fall for such things when they're not Twitter-pated. That's honestly what I feel has happened to CosmicSkeptic here. He's usually had some pretty rigorous quality stuff on here, but I think the veganism and the animal rights stuff is emotionally blinding him, and the rigor of his arguments are in turn suffering for it. CosmicSkeptic knows that the problem of evil, while an emotionally strong argument, is not a logically strong argument. This should be well known to CosmicSkeptic as it is well known to academia. He uses Dr. Craig, a Christian apologist, to base much of his arguments off of in this video. Dr. Craig, in this debate recording that he uses, begins his rebuttal with the correct and well-known answer. Sadly, this part is left out of CosmicSkeptic's video.
Basically, the problem of evil in an evidential version. Is this a good argument for God's non-existence? Well, I think not. Now, certainly, the terrible evil and suffering in the world is the greatest emotional obstacle to belief in God. But as philosophers, we're called upon to say not how we feel about a subject, but what we think about it. And when I think hard about the problem of evil, it turns out to be extraordinarily difficult for the atheist to prove, on the basis of the evil in the world, that God does not exist. We all know cases in which we permit suffering because we have morally sufficient reasons for allowing it. What Dr. Law would have to prove is that it's impossible or highly improbable that God has morally sufficient reasons for permitting the suffering in the world. But how can the atheist possibly prove that? Maybe only in a world suffused with natural and moral evil would the maximum number of people come to freely know God and find eternal life. You see, on the Christian view, the purpose of life is not happiness in this world, but rather coming to know God personally and so find eternal life. And many evils may be utterly pointless with respect to producing happiness in this life, but they may not be pointless with respect to producing the knowledge of God. Dr. Law would have to show that there is another world which is feasible for God, in which there is a greater knowledge of God and His salvation, but with less suffering. And that's pure speculation.
That's 100% correct. Pure speculation. Case closed. There are no good rebuttals to this that stand up, and that's why this argument of the problem of evil has been largely abandoned in the philosophical community for many years now, except by YouTube atheists who use it all the time and in popular media. Again, CosmicSkeptic must know all this, but he still hopelessly presses on, giving no new great argument to resurrect the problem of evil. Sorry, no Christian pun intended here. Yeah, right. Of course I intended a pun there, Mike. Come on. His strategy seems to be, instead of facing the main challenge, he decides to pick off one of the later trailing side comments Dr. Craig makes after his first and main argument.
Now, let me say one more thing about animal predation and suffering, since this featured largely in his argument. Number one, animals are part of a broader ecosystem in which the human drama is played out. And such an ecosystem must be balanced if it's to be viable. It is no accident that every ecosystem involves predators of some sort. For example, I also recently saw a program on television about how the Canadian authorities are reintroducing wolves into the wild in Canada. Why? Because in the absence of these predators, the caribou herds were overpopulating because there was no one to pick off the diseased and the aged, and as a result they were overgrazing and therefore dying of starvation. The predators actually enhanced the survivability and the health of the caribou herds on which they preyed.
While tons of popular YouTube atheists would do this, I expect much more quality for CosmicSkeptic, which again surprises me. Another odd thing he says is this.
Well, it's not like Christians don't have a response to the problem of evil. There are many quite famous attempts to reconcile the existence of evil with a loving God. The problem is that a great many of these attempts, which are known as Theodicies, by the way, simply don't apply to non-humans.
Come on, Theodicies don't apply to non-humans. Of course it would. Why would you think the principle wouldn't follow to any living thing? Theodicies answer all kinds of variant questions that are in the same spectrum of the problem of evil. This isn't even a brand new, never-before-realized claim. People have discussed this issue with animal suffering all the way to what if aliens came into the picture. Nothing here is new. All these arguments work the exact same as they do for human suffering and are equally easy to defeat. Human free will is only one piece of why there is suffering according to Christianity. CosmicSkeptic seems to be forgetting that the Christian has a bigger explanation for the suffering than just free will. Christianity 101. We live in a fallen world. This is a very old and foundational belief to Christianity's explanation of the cosmos. Yes, there is human choice, but we also live in a fallen world, so everything is affected. It's not just human free will that creates evil.
Think about this. What would we expect to find if we assume that there is no God, and animals in nature are just randomly mutating and evolving and competing for resources with no divine guidance? Well, we'd expect pretty much exactly what we observe in the real world, a messy bloodbath and a struggle for survival. Now, what would we expect to see if we assumed the existence of an all-loving and all-powerful God? Maybe some level of suffering that we might not be able to fully explain, but nothing even remotely approaching the level of horror and pain that actually exists in the natural world. It is incalculably easier to account for this suffering on an atheistic worldview.
This is where atheists completely bewilder me. How they don't see the extreme oddity of these kinds of statements is beyond me. To criticize Christianity for allegedly not caring about animal rights and then in the same line of thought say, well, I believe in another belief that doesn't give any justification for animal life either, is just so bizarre to me. Doesn't that mean this would be your biggest problem with atheism too? I mean, if you think Christianity supposedly has a big problem with this issue, a naturalistic worldview is a complete dumpster fire. Naturalism believes in billions of years where all kinds of living creatures are destroyed with asteroids, natural disasters, and all kinds of death for no reason or great purpose on top of that. Its main mechanism for any semblance of progress, natural selection, is essentially progress through mass death. How exactly does that justify any of your beliefs? It's basically the worst belief you could hold if you care about human or animal rights. If that's your belief, there is no point to anything you are ultimately fighting for here in this video. Why even care about animals? There would be no reason. And in an atheistic worldview, everything is just atoms and molecules and chemical reactions happening. Feelings and suffering, CosmicSkeptic so often makes a plea for, are irrelevant and are all just cause senses from chemical reactions going on in the nervous system for the atheist worldview. Nothing real, according to CosmicSkeptic's worldview, could justify treating any animal well. Animal suffering then doesn't matter, and therefore it shouldn't matter how you treat them, why treat them well, or even care about it. It just doesn't make sense if you're an atheist. There is no foundation or justification for any morality for animals at all in this worldview, and is probably the most hopeless religion of all when it comes to this issue and many similar moral problems. But have I got good news for you, CosmicSkeptic? Christianity, despite what you have said, gives you a foundation and justification for caring about animals regardless if they can feel pain or not. You see, Christianity has had a long and rich history trying to grapple with this question of where the line is between proper and improper use of God's creation. Since creation, God has instructed humans to tend and care for His creation and not abuse it. Christians for many centuries had legal protection for nature and its animals. Even flies could win court cases because they were to be treated properly in honor of God. You can look all this up. This actually happened many times. Animals would be given trials and assigned lawyers who would use God and biblical authority to defend them, and they often won. The world's first humane society was founded by William Wilberforce, who was a passionate Christian who brought about the end of the Atlantic slave trade as well as ending many abuses toward animals. A man completely driven tirelessly by his faith. This whole stream of thought, in fact, to care and not treat nature and its creatures trivially in the West, comes from a Christian worldview. Not born from an atheistic worldview. This is definitely not Christianity's biggest problem. Try again, Buster. If CosmicSkeptic is looking for a foundation to stand on to support his belief in veganism and animal welfare, he actually would be better off ditching a purposeless view of materialistic atheism and come on over to the light, where he can build a much stronger case for his passion for these things. Because, honestly, it sounds like for CosmicSkeptic, atheism is his biggest problem. Well, that's all for this episode, but if you like this episode, go ahead and subscribe. Check out our other episodes as we address different issues in our world and bring you the truth of Christ in a post-truth culture. Grace and peace, brothers and sisters.